Hello and welcome back. So today is a really interesting day because we've already talked about kind of that boardroom and your intellect running amok and putting everything back in perspective. And we talked about your emotions, but there's other members at that table. There's other members that have a voice in your guidance, in your inner compass. And I kind of mentioned them, and the big ones that I like to talk about are your intuition, your instincts, and your gut. And people can get kind of weird about this because they are kind of intangible. They are kind of hard to define. But, even a lot of science backs this up because they'll talk about sort of the bandwidth, or if the different parts of your brain were like a computer, how much data they process. And so your conscious mind, your cortex, I think the comparison is usually it's like 40 bits of data a second. And your limbic system, which is the more primal part of your mind, which is where your subconscious and your unconscious come from, it's usually like 40 million bits of data per second. And so that doesn't really have any context for us. So the way I like to think about it is it's like your primal brain is like a supercomputer. It's like a brand new desktop Mac. It's like fully tricked out with all the latest features, all the upgrades. And your conscious mind is kind of like an iPhone 3. It's so old that if you were trying to open Facebook on it now, you'd get that little spinning wheel and it would be so slow. So there's this part of your mind that is processing all the data in your environment, everything that's coming through all of your senses. It can access, your memories, all of these like different parts of your awareness. It's when you're in a conversation, it's analyzing all the nonverbal cues, body language, subtext, everything. But that part of your mind, the primal part of your mind, the supercomputer, isn't wired to your conscious mind the way you think that it would be. And your language center lives in your cortex, in your conscious mind. So when your primal supercomputer figures something out, it doesn't arrive as language. It doesn't arrive as this person is untrustworthy as a sentence, because that comes mostly from your conscious mind, where the language is. It comes as a feeling. The subconscious is the feeling mind. That's what that means. So we don't get that in language, this perfect explanation. This person I'm speaking to is untrustworthy. I should disengage. It comes as a feeling, as a visceral response. There's something off of it. I don't know what it is, but something's not right. And so even if you're a person that wants, a scientific explanation and a lot of analysis, there really is a lot of backing behind this. And all kinds of people in all kinds of different professions and all kinds of, even in police and detectives will talk about instincts and trusting their intuition and stuff. So we intuitively know in our language that this is a real thing, even if we can't fully quantify it. And again, I don't explain a lot of things. I do want to explain a little bit of this because I think it has more value than people often realize. But the point of what I want you to do today is to really think about, what do those mean? And we don't necessarily have to experience things through all three of these channels. Some people will just have kind of an unknown awareness. So some people are just like, I have my instincts, I have my intuition. But what I want you to do for today is to really think about, if there were 3 different channels, or maybe even more, how would I experience them and how would those come through me? And so in my own lived experience and with working with many clients and kind of talking through this, reflecting on this, using this as a tool, I've come up with some definitions that I think are valuable. So the first one is intuition. And intuition, generally defined as coming as intuitive hits. There are things that come in the moment right there, but then they're gone. So intuition is really interesting in that way. It's something you just know. Sometimes something happens and you just know what they're thinking. You know that they're not going to be reliable. You know that they're thinking about breaking up. You know they're being dishonest. You have it in a moment and then it's gone. And what's really interesting about this is, if you don't learn to trust it, then because it's gone, you can't go back and analyze it. So there's a real level of trust there of going, I felt that intuitive hit. I know that my intuition is good. And even though I only felt it for a moment, I'm going to trust that there's value there. Again, doesn't have to run the whole board table, but we're going to weight that and say that board member just voted and that vote has value. Your instincts kind of have come to this definition that are things we just know. So maybe you're considering a new job, or your partner or a family member is like talking about going on a vacation or doing something new, and you don't know why, you don't know what it is, you just have this awareness that it's not the right choice. Or maybe it's the opposite. You know, maybe you are starting a new career, or maybe something's happening in your life and people want you to rationalize, again, coming back to always having to rationalize everything. Everyone wants the reasons and you're like, I just know. I would consider that your instincts. And how instincts is different from intuition is that instinct stays. As long as that awareness is needed, it will stay with you. You'll just have this prevalent knowing that this is, you know, right or wrong. You just know. And the third is, I like to define as your gut feelings. I had a gut feeling. I just knew it. I felt it in my gut. And the difference is with gut feelings, they tend to be very visceral. People will feel them literally in their gut or maybe even in their chest. Anxiety can actually be a gut feeling sometimes, you know, and I'm not talking about anxiety where we're living with it all the time, we're crippling, but maybe we've healed, we've made anxiety unfamiliar, and something happens and then we feel anxiety. Well, that anxiety might actually be a gut feeling, a gut response that's helping you understand something or get some information. Sometimes we might feel a gut feeling, you know, it might be that we're going into a dark alley and we have this visceral feeling in our body that it's not safe. You know, it's really interesting because a lot of people who are sexually assaulted will say something like, there came a point and I just knew. Sometimes before they even, you know, met the person that was going to be their assailant, will say, you know, I went into this room, or I sent to this, and I felt it in my gut. I just knew something was wrong. I would consider that a gut feeling. It tends to be very visceral. It tends to be longer lasting, but not as long lasting as instincts, but definitely longer lasting than intuition. And yeah, we just feel it. You know, sometimes it's like, maybe you have a best friend that has a new partner, and they've talked so much about them and you're so excited to meet them, and then you meet this person and they say all the right things, they do all the right things, they smile and they're polite, but you feel sick in your stomach. There's just something off about them. I would consider that a gut feeling. And now again, all of these can be deeply, deeply subjective for people. So I don't want you to take these definitions as like law, because they're not. They're just what I've kind of come up with to try to create a framework to understand this thing that's generally quite intangible. However, what I do want you to do is say, if I did have these three channels, what would each of them look like? What's a time that I've experienced one in each way? And ultimately, I would say about half of my clients just ultimately decide that they're not aware enough to differentiate between all the different things, and they just, you know, sort of go with one, the word that suits them the best, or the feeling, or the way that, so like for me, I am definitely the most intuitive. I get intuitive hits constantly. For me, it's that intuition. Those intuitive hits are the number one thing that I experience. And so if that's all I was really focused on, I don't really need to worry about anything else. I can just go, okay, I have this intuition, and this intuition is real. Intuition, you get a seat at the table. So as a thought experiment, as self-observation, I want you to think about the different channels that you could have, what that would feel like, how you would define them for you, come up with examples, and self-observe for what information is actually coming through these channels, you know, and then giving those board members a vote at your table of decision making. But ultimately, you don't have to have all these three different things. It's not like you must figure this out. Ultimately, what I'm trying to get you to understand is you have this awareness that's kind of intangible and hard to define, but is equally powerful in your decision making and gets to sit at the boardroom at that table with your emotion and with your intellect. So don't get swept away in too much analysis with this, but do really reflect on that and then ultimately decide, what does that look like for you? What is that who is that final board member? And then give them a seat at your table. And then you have one more decision-making tool, one more channel of information, so we can stop driving ourselves crazy with our mind and let our whole being guide us. And that feels good. So you're doing amazing. I'll see you in the next video.